Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. Welcome to the ChatGPT podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Each episode, we dive into the latest developments in the exciting field of artificial intelligence, exploring its applications and potential impacts on our daily lives. Today's episode is brought to you by Self-Pause, which is an AI life coach that I absolutely love. Self-Pause allows you to go and have a conversation around anything that you're trying to achieve. It helps you set goals. It helps you build positive habits, eliminate limiting beliefs. It's essentially just your personal coach for anything that you're trying to focus on in life. The best AI life coach. You need to check them out. Go download the app. This is something that seriously can change your mindset, and I am a massive believer in mindset. I know that if you change your mindset, you can accomplish anything you want to. So go download the Self-Pause app today, iOS and Android. This is something you absolutely need to get. Since the launch of the original ChatGPT, and it's now ChatGPT4 has come out, a lot of people have been talking about how this revolutionizes pretty much every industry. And one of the massive areas that people are talking about is medical. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about how ChatGPT is going to revolutionize the medical industry. And that is because there is a new book that is recently being published. We're going to dive into that by a prominent healthcare worker and computer scientist. And it's being co-authored with the VP, one of the VPs over at Microsoft, who obviously has a lot to do with OpenAI and everything going on over there. So let's jump into it. So a lot of this is being talked about in the news right now. There's an article in Insider that says the newest version of ChatGPT passed the U.S. medical licensing exam with flying colors and diagnosed a 1 in 100,000 condition in seconds. And so today we want to talk about that. A lot of this is coming from Dr. Isaac Cohen, who he's both a computer scientist and he's at Harvard, and he's also a physician. And so he was teaming up to kind of test drive GPT-4 on its, before it originally launched. And his goal was to see how this was going to be able to work with doctors in kind of a medical setting. He said, "I'm stunned to say better than many doctors I've observed." So he's literally saying that this thing is functioning better than a lot of doctors, which is kind of scary. And it's not too surprising. I mean, a lot of this test-taking kind of stuff, you could say, because this thing was in the 90th percentile when it took the medical exam, or the main medical exam. So this thing is incredibly powerful. Obviously, the medical licensing exam. It had a couple other benefits, or I guess features that this is able to do. GPT-4, it's not just a good test taker and fact finder, but it's also a really good translator. So this makes it very useful in the medical field because it's able to translate discharge information for a patient who speaks Portuguese, and it can also go, and it's really good at kind of distilling wonky technical jargon into something that sixth graders could read. So this thing's obviously incredibly powerful, and a lot of people are saying that just the language translation alone is going to help it to make medical discoveries in different locations more easily accessible all around the world. So he has a couple kind of vivid examples, and he says that GPT-4 can also give doctors really helpful suggestions about bedside manner. It can offer tips on how to talk to patients about their conditions in a compassionate but clear language, right? Because you can ask ChatGPT, say there's a patient with these problems, how would I address them in a compassionate, clear manner, blah, blah. You can put anything you want there, and it can obviously spit out a really good response. Now, this has been criticized, not this exact use, but there was recently a school shooting, and the school that notified the parents about the school shooting used ChatGPT to write the memo they sent out. And so a lot of people were quite up in arms. They're saying with something so atrocious as this, surely a real person could have written it. And it's kind of hard because I guess playing talking from the other side, I think the people that originally wrote it, they themselves, there was school faculty, and they themselves had a lot of trauma and didn't really want to sit down and write something so painful, so they use this tool to kind of help them. So, I mean, there's two sides of that story and controversy, and I know people have a lot of different opinions on that, but all I'm saying is it was a controversial topic that people are discussing, right? Should ChatGPT write sensitive or highly emotionally charged or, really sad news like this? So, in any case, it is something that a lot of doctors struggle with, right? Maybe they don't know the right words to say, and this is something that will help them. And I personally can, I guess I have some empathy for those doctors in that situation, as I myself would not, know necessarily how to comfort someone in in super hard situations. So that's one area that it will be used. Another that they discuss in this book is that it can be it can read really lengthy reports and studies, and it can summarize them in like seconds, right? Like super fast. And this is really useful because the people that are, obviously doctors that are diagnosing diseases, if they have the latest studies, which are always, new ones are always coming out, but if they're able to summarize some of the latest studies coming out in a particular field, maybe relating to a particular disease that they specialize in, this could be really powerful for staying up to date on the latest information in your field. Something else that ChatGPT can do is it can explain its reasoning. It talks about making a diagnosis or solving a problem, and a lot of people are saying that looks a lot like, human-styled intelligence if you ask it to explain its reasoning behind something. But if you ask ChatGPT how it does all this, it's likely just going to tell you that its intelligence is still limited to patterns in the data, that it doesn't really involve any true understanding or intentionality. So, that's what GPT told a lot of different people when they've asked about that. But even with these types of limitations, GPT-4 can mimic how doctors diagnose conditions with a really stunning success rate, although it is not perfect, which is, I think, a really important point to bring up here. So a lot of doctors that are kind of looking at this right now and taking it are looking at this. There's one in particular, he took it through kind of a clinical thought experiment, and he based it off of a real life case that involved a newborn baby he treated several years earlier. And so he gave it a few different details about the baby he gathered from its physical exam, as well as some information from the ultrasound and hormone levels that he collected. And GPT-4 was actually able to correctly diagnose a 1 in 100,000 condition, which is called congenital adrenal hyperplasty. And anyways, this doctor said just as he would have with all of his years of study and experience, GPT-4 was able to do this in a couple seconds. And so, he was both impressed and kind of horrified. And if you think about it, it's like on the one hand, it's, obviously solving this really sophisticated problem and giving this really sophisticated diagnosis, which is really impressive and amazing. But on the other hand, it's kind of mind-blowing to think that, so many people are going to have access to this, and it's hard to guarantee or, certify that GPT-4 or any other AI model's advice is actually going to be safe and effective, right? Like, you would hate for something like this to not be perfect and to have any sort of issues. So it's important to know that GPT-4 isn't always right. And some people also say, they note, GPT-4 doesn't have an ethical compass. I think that, when every doctor in the US takes when they go and take the medical licensing exam, they do something which is called taking the Hippocratic Oath, which I think is just like saying, they'll never harm another human. Obviously, GPT-4 has not taken the Hippocratic Oath, and so people are concerned that using it for doctors' practices, maybe, it will do something that will harm people. And obviously, we've seen a lot of instances where GPT-4 does what people call hallucinates, just comes up with a random answer, or it doesn't do something correctly. When talking about a lot of these different issues that it has, there are ways around it. I mean, obviously, you're going to need a real human doctor to give a second opinion and look over these results. And also, just on the sense of getting GPT-4 to give better results in these areas, you can also go, I think one trick a lot of people do is you start a fresh tab on ChatGPT and give it all the data and ask it if there's any mistakes in there, and get it to look at it with a fresh set of eyes, similar to having a person look at something with a fresh set of eyes, or having, giving the opinion of another trusted advisor. You can also get it to explain, and I think this is a really powerful thing that doctors will want to be using, is get it to explain its reasoning process behind a particular diagnosis or something, because as it goes through and it kind of outlines why it said something, you can see if there's any flaws in the logic that brought it to its final conclusion. So I think this is going to be, all in all, a really incredible tool. I think it's going to free up a lot of time for different healthcare providers and clinicians to be able to be a lot more present with their patients instead of just on the computer screen all the time. But we also have to, I think, because doctors right now are saying like, hey, this thing's not perfect, it makes mistakes, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's totally valid and true, and we definitely don't want to rely on this. But I do think it's important for us to be thinking about the fact that we're continually going to be living in a world where this technology gets better and better, these results get better and better, and eventually it will be, right, like right now if it's in the 90th percentile, eventually it will be in the 99th percentile. And what does that mean? That means that this thing is better than 99% of any doctors taking this, and if it's really that much better, like, people are going to solely rely on this thing. People are going to build different tools and bots, whether it's regulated or unregulated, to get their medical advice from these kind of sources. And so I think it's going to be, it's an interesting question that we have to start talking about, and we have to kind of force ourselves to imagine what this world will look like with these machines that are essentially smarter than us. And we're going to have to decide, how do we want that world to work? What do we want that to look like? It's going to be a lot of crazy stuff, a lot of big questions, and it's going to be something that obviously is going to require a lot of very smart people focusing on it. So it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how that evolves in the future. If you are looking for an innovative and creative community of people using ChatGPT, you need to join our ChatGPT creators community. I'll drop a link in the description to this podcast. We'd love to see you there, where we share tips and tricks of what is working in ChatGPT. It's a lot easier than a podcast, as you can see screenshots, you can share and comment on things that are currently working. So if this sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the comment. We'd love to have you in the community. You've been listening to the ChatGPT podcast. Make sure to rate us wherever you listen to your podcasts, and have a fantastic week.